Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience. And my name is Leanne Clark. I'm the VP of Wellness and Disability Growth and Innovation here at Cowan Benefits. I'd like to welcome you to our quarterly Cowan client webinar, Building Resilient Workplaces, How to Embrace Change and Foster Positivity. Well, I know one way, and that's by the sunshine outside. I don't think anything makes me happier than seeing the sun. We had such a miserable weekend, so it's nice to see this. I am welcoming back today's speaker, Meaghan Jansen. She has presented for us on numerous occasions in the past, so hopefully you've had a chance to see her present before. Meaghan is a leadership development specialist. She is an international speaker, and she's the owner of Employee Wellness Solutions Network, which is a Canadian workplace wellness and leadership firm that she founded in 2003. So Meaghan is local. She's from London, Ontario, recognized as a community living London hero and a Business London Top 20 Under 40 recipient. So she brings 2 decades of experience helping organizations build healthy, high-performing cultures. She is a professor and a corporate training facilitator. She partners with leaders to drive sustainable performance through strong culture, resilience, and a people-first leadership. So I'm pleased to welcome Meaghan. And before I turn it over to you, I just want to add some housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat. Feel free to use the reactions emoticon in Teams if you want to put a heart or a clap or a thumbs up if Meaghan's asking some questions. Also, if you require captioning, it's available through the Teams event program. So please take advantage of that if you require that. Our webinar will be recorded and the full presentation will be sent out probably about 2 weeks from the presentation date. And so you will have an opportunity to receive that, as well as Meaghan's going to send out some material that can help you with building your own strong and resilient culture. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Meaghan. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. I jumped to the opportunity to be here today. I think it's an important topic, and I'm excited to get right into things. I'm all about, if anyone's heard me speak in the past, either in person or virtually, I'm all about leaving my audiences with at least one nugget, or I like to call them aha moments. Is there anything that speaks to you in the session? Jot those down. It's always a great opportunity to learn, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is sharing some, I hope, some practical strategies for us as leaders, people leaders, individual contributors, teammates, frontline staff, whoever you are. So welcome to the session. I like to start all of my sessions off with this, though, is that we are going to be diving into a few different topics that may strike a nerve, and recognizing that everybody on this call has a story, and everybody on this call have had various things go on, specifically in this world as it is. So recognizing that this is by no means a substitute for additional support should you need it. So recognizing that is always an important piece to my sessions. So I'm all about, how do we build resilient workplaces? How do we embrace change? How do we foster positivity? By being our best self. And my message today is really targeted toward, how do we be our best selves, and then both personally and professionally. And with doing so, we're able to look at 3 different pieces to this. And the first I'm going to be spending some time on is embracing change. Change is hard. So we're going to have a small discussion on that. Talk about the challenge of change. Then we're going to be talking about building resiliency. And resiliency is all about advancing despite adversity. And that's an important concept. We're going to spend some time on that. And the third element we're going to be talking about is, how do we foster positivity when things get hard? How do we move from setback to story? How do we champion progress over perfection? And how do we champion those cultures? So I hope that you'll enjoy it as much as I do presenting it, in sharing some valuable tips and suggestions. As I go through the deck today, I will be showcasing some of my favorite reads. And I will, as Leanne suggested, if there are any books and podcasts and things that you have read that you'd like to contribute to the conversation, please put those in the chat box. I'm always excited to hear how people what you like and what you like to read and listen to. So please feel free to do that as you're prompted. So the first element of this big world of resiliency and embracing change and fostering positivity is this first piece, is how do we do it? How do we actually embrace change? There's so much adversity. There's so much change around us in our workplaces and our personal lives. And with the world upside down as it is, I think this is a timely topic to really dive in. I want to first talk about building trust. Trust is the superpower on teams. If we have trust, it is really, in my opinion, the most important. Specifically when we are off kilter, off balance, if we are faced with change and adversity, how do we build trust? And we're going to be just mentioning that a little bit. We're then going to be moving into how do we navigate change bravely? And then how do we also build self-awareness? So we're going to be getting into a few concepts pertaining to this one and first topic of embracing change. So as I mentioned, trust is the superpower when it comes to effective workplaces, specifically when we are faced with change and making hard decisions and working on building resiliency. Resiliency is a muscle. The more we use it, the better we are at it. And so when we start talking about resiliency from an organizational standpoint, trust comes into the equation first and foremost. So from the Harvard Business Review, some of you may recognize this trust triangle. It was coined in 2020 by Francis Fry and Ann Morris. And this is, I think it really encapsulates the piece on trust and building trust on teams. And there's three things that are true when we have trust on teams. And they're not all going to be necessarily easy to grasp, but the three elements really are logic, authenticity, and empathy. When we start to see trust built on teams, we know that that is one, a superpower, and two, makes it easier for workplaces and organizations to move through a challenge or change. And so from the leftmost point of our triangle is logic. People might not always agree with decisions that we're making as leaders, people leaders, and individual contributors on teams. But if there's trust built on a team, I might not agree with you, but I understand why that decision is being made. Authenticity is I get to experience the real you. If you don't have the answers, that's okay. I was working with an organization recently, and one of the senior executives, the organization was going through lots of change. And she came on the call and said, look, I know your frustrations. I'm frustrated too. I don't have all the answers. As soon as I have answers, I will be sharing those with you. So experiencing the real authentic you is also a valuable piece to the trust triangle. And the third, which I'll get into a little later, is this piece on empathy and caring. If we care for each other in our workplaces, kindness matters in our workplaces, especially when we're faced with challenge, change, and adversity. And so these three pieces, we're going to be suggesting various practical strategies around those today, as trust is a big piece to our discussion. So I like this graphic because it explains, I think, a lot. You'll see two photos, two depictions. One says familiar and one says unfamiliar. And it's simply a cartoon of a baby with someone that they're familiar, their mother in this case. And so very familiar with that relationship. But as soon as a baby is pushed outside of comfort zone in an unfamiliar territory, what happens? Well, we all know what happens. We get a little more, anxious. We might react. There might be some, elements of nervousness, uncertainty, which is exactly happens when we move from a familiar to an unfamiliar. And when change happens, that's throwing us completely out of whack sometimes. And so when we are off balance, we're in uncomfortable situation, we can start to have those feelings of anxiety, emotional distress, uncertainty, anger, irritation. There is a human side of change, and we're going to be talking about those. But this concept from familiar to unfamiliar or uncomfortable, we have all been there. We all know what that feels like. So there is, as I said, the human side of change. And I recently was listening to a podcast, and I'll, because I can't see you, I can only see a little red light, a little white light. Hopefully you can see my props here, but you might recognize the name Jim Collins. He wrote the book and called Good to Great. And he also was interviewed in a podcast all about, and this is his new one, What to Make of a Life. I don't know if anyone's read that or have heard of it. Tremendous read. Just the podcast interview was amazing. But his philosophy is really all about these cliffs. And when we are forced out of balance and forced into an uncomfortable situation or uncomfortable setting because of change, we can experience these cliff moments. And we, all of us on this call have had probably multiple cliff moments where, you know, you're feeling okay, and then all of a sudden something happens and you're off the cliff. And you can see in this photo, over the cliff, there's fog. And so Jim talks a lot about through fog, there's uncertainty, there's irritation, there's frustration. We don't know which way is up sometimes after we kind of go through a change. And the change can be personal, professional, health-wise, family, relationship, etc. Recognizing that everybody has cliff moments and we end up in the fog, and everybody experiences fog, and fog can last for a short time or a long time, just indecisive, but not sure really where we want to go after. And so Jim talks a lot about this concept from the human side of change and how to get through that fog. And he talks about inner fire, self-awareness, self-knowledge. And so I highly recommend this book. If you haven't heard of it, or if you haven't, jot this one down for sure. So the human side of change is valuable to recognize. When we are in our workplaces and going through our day-to-day, our teammates, our leaders, our peers might be going through a cliff moment. And so these cliff moments are challenging, as we talked about, for people. And all of us have had these: change in job, change in relationship, change in health, all of these. So when we start to look at this productivity over time, human side of change graphic, we see the bell curve, and the bell curve is really representing this cliff and the fog, and kind of going up on, kind of getting out of the fog and getting to the other side. When it comes to resiliency, this is the piece where we advance despite adversity. And this is really how, from a humanistic standpoint, how this can be very powerful, is understanding that obviously there's an end to something. So this is that cliff that, you know, we're off the cliff. We now kind of not sure what's up. We're going through denial. We're going through anger, shock, possibly from an end perspective. Not sure when is, you know, what is going to be on the other side. From a transition standpoint, this is the neutral zone where we've sort of fallen down into frustration, confusion, not having all the answers, very uncertain when it comes to the fog. This is the fog. This is where we're not really sure what to do next after a change, adversity, or challenge. And then we move eventually through the fog, one step at a time, which is what Jim Collins talks about. And then we move into something more, and where we start to recognize excitement, or engage, we have higher energy. And so this is the human side of change. And this is an important concept, because as we know, if we find that people on our teams are, you know, a certain, you know, productivity initially, and then there's a little bit of a lull, they might have jumped off that cliff. They might be through the fog. And so that's important to recognize in this world of resiliency, is that recognizing the human side of change. And this is an important concept. So productivity over time, we will get back up there, but sometimes it takes people a little longer. And knowing that, where we live in these, cliff moments and fog moments, getting through that is also can be a challenge for teams and workplaces. Now, when we're going through those changes and adversity, and this is all part of the piece where we're kind of advancing despite this adversity, is knowing what we can do to recognize. If we recognize someone on the team, someone in our workplace, is embracing change with kindness. And I actually brought a compass. So I actually use this compass. And so this compass is a symbol. And I use this a lot. I was given to this as a little girl to really help with a moral code, moral compass. And I like to think of myself as embracing change and people with kindness. But I encourage you to also to think about this as a symbol is we have the north, the east, the south, and the west, of course. But I just find this piece of metal to be quite a symbol for me. Is that if I know that on my team or my workplace where there's a change and people are irritated and frustrated and maybe not unsure, uncertain because not enough, we don't have all the information is recognizing that the N is North Star, what's right. So how and what's right in the situation. E is East, and that's more empathy. So how can we lean in with kindness and caring when it comes to change and embracing change with that kindness? So E is East, empathy. S is support. How can we support our peers and our teams? And so S is support. I find that to be a nice element in our compass. And W is wonder, leaning in, asking questions, leaning in with curiosity. And these four elements really I find anyway, to be a grounding symbol when it comes to when we're dealing with change and a lot of fog and cliff moments, is embracing it with kindness and how we can show up as leaders, as people leaders and individual contributors along the way. I was listening to this speaker and in this kind of concept of resiliency and working through change and adversity. And it was commented like, leaders are like the weather, when it's sunny and when it's stormy. And so just a few reminders here as we kind of lean into more kindness, really, when it comes to change in our workplaces. Now, the second element that I want to talk a little bit about now is this piece on resiliency. How do we actually get through those tough times? And specifically a lot with, as we talked about, a lot of changes that do tend to continue to happen and uncertainty, quite frankly. So building resiliency through this time frame is is not easy. And so this next segment, I want to share and share with you some practical strategies when it comes to what we can do as individuals to build our own resiliency. And that's really where we're going to go with this. So we're going to talk about a few different things. One is we're going to talk about how do we build capacity. And then the second element is there is a space that's an uncomfortable space. And so we're going to talk about how do we embrace that, and then how do we then utilize these tips and strategies from our own personal building our best self, and how do we empower and inspire others to do the same. So we'll be talking about a few different concepts with this material today. So I want to start with this other give you an idea of what I'm going with this. On the screen, you see a glass of water and a pitcher. So I have the same. I don't have water in them, don't worry. But I have a cup and I have a pitcher. And so pretend my pitcher is full of water like on the screen. And every single time something happens to us, we can kind of put a little bit of water into the cup. So each time, something challenging happens to us where we're kind of our stresses are accumulating over time, and in some cases, not maybe not, doesn't take too long for some of us, but sometimes we can feel this feeling of overwhelm, where the water is overflowing our cup. And that feeling of overwhelm is hard. We can, have emotions, irritation, frustration, anger, sadness, emotional distress, maybe, challenges with maybe mindset, mental health. So a lot of this sort of overwhelmed feeling can happen. And so the purpose of this is we know that the capacity to fill this cup isn't a lot, with all the things that happen day to day. The idea is not to necessarily say we can't deal with these stresses and these things that are happening to us, but we just need a bigger container. So instead of a dinky little glass, why not get a garbage pail or a large capacity? So each thing that happens is really, quote unquote, a drop in that bucket. So it's going to take a lot longer to fill. So we're not saying we need to necessarily change our stresses, because a lot of what we deal with are out of our control. But what we can do is, can we build a bigger reservoir? So that's really where we're going to go with this next segment, is what can we do individually to build our capacity so that when things happen, we're more in tune with dealing with them as they come. It's a big piece of resiliency, and embracing change is if we're ready to do that. And the more we can prepare ahead of time, resiliency is a muscle. The more we can prepare and use it and practice it, the more we're going to be able to feel better in the long run, specifically when we're advancing through adversity. So we want to build capacity. We don't need, we need a bigger reservoir. That's really what we're going to look for, and what we're going to try and do. So there is this space when we're kind of going through those feelings of overwhelm, of change and challenge and adversity, etc., is we can be in a space of not knowing, and over time getting answers. And so the next challenge I'm kind of throwing out to us today is to embrace that space. It's not easy, from not knowing and needing to know all the information to knowing. I've recently learned to embrace this space as the learning space. If I don't have all the information, if I don't have all the answers that I feel like I need, I'm learning how to lean into this space of embracing it, recognizing that there are ups and downs all the way through, but I'll eventually get to know the information that I need. Now, there are a couple of resources that I want to share, and this one I think is personally, and those of you who've heard me speak before, I've mentioned this book before, and I keep referring to it because I love it that much. It's called Peaks and Valleys. Where is it? This is by Dr. Spencer Johnson. This is a very old CD. I'm sure you can get it on audio book. Obviously, you can get everything on audiobook, but I'm just showing you the physical version of what I have here. But The Peaks and Valleys by Dr. Spencer Johnson. He does a tremendous job going and talking about the peaks and valleys through this space of uncomfort. And in really looking into the element of when we're in a valley, a foggy valley, when we get up to the peak, the view's a little different. But we don't want to get too comfortable up there. We recognize that kind of life kind of goes the ups and downs, but he really, in parable format, does an excellent job talking about it. He also wrote the book, Who Moved My Cheese? So that's another really great one that I find to be a valuable read as well. So I've got a few other ones to show you in a moment. Another one that I recently read is this Angela Duckworth's book called Grit. So this one talks about the power of passion and perseverance. And this is a kind of getting through that foggy time, one step in front of the other with so much uncertainty and change, is kind of moving one step at a time. And she does a really great job at talking about purpose and meaning in what we are doing. And a really great book on how our passion and perseverance can get us through. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. Now, with all of this, it's important to recognize that our mental wellness is in flux all the time. We're never standing still. And this is an important concept, and it's kind of, I hope, a aha moment for some of us, and hopefully you've had a couple already, even if it's a book or a suggestion and something that has landed so far in terms of a aha moment. But there are levels, I shouldn't say levels, but a spectrum. Our mental wellness is really on this continuum. And so we have our neutral. And if we're feeling good about something, we're going to be moving toward more of the, we feel a little bit better, more on that the happiness scale. And then if something's happened, we can kind of slide down a little bit and bad news or a tough conversation. And then we typically can bounce back to neutral. So our baseline is pretty standard when it comes to, we know what our baseline is. We're neither high, we're neither low, but we're kind of in the middle. And so when things happen to us, we can be moved out of alignment, but typically we'll land back to our baseline. If we are kind of going through and this, mental wellness is in flux, and we end up being on the left side of our continuum, for longer than 2 weeks, this is where, obviously, as I said from off the hop, is leaning into additional support as needed. We do find that mental wellness, because this is an important concept, we're in flux day to day and sometimes hour to hour in some cases in how we show up at work, on how we deal with things that are coming our way. And so if we understand that it's okay, we're moving all the time, that's important. We can't be, happy and positive and things all the time. And that's important to know. We are in movement. And so that's again, from a resilience standpoint, that's important to recognize, and being self-aware of your mental wellness and how it does tend to shift and move over the continuum. So from a mental resiliency perspective and really kind of leaning into this element is, I don't know if this will come as a surprise to some of you, but we are wired to be negative. We are wired to think negatively first. And it's because eons ago, it's a survival mechanism. And so we think the worst, we're going to starve, we're going to freeze. When our counterpart was out, doing the hunting and gathering, we were unsure of if we're going to be fed, if we're going to live after 3 days, where's the water coming from? And so we have innate human behavior to think negatively first. And it does take a lot to shift that paradigm, and it takes a lot of work. It doesn't happen naturally, and that's where we start to talk about resiliency as this muscle. The more we use it, the more we practice it, the better we are at it. And so I like to use the analogy of, as I said, everyone's sort of at their baseline. And something's happened and you feel really, 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 really good about something. You got a job promotion, you got a compliment from one of your leaders, you ran a marathon, whatever the case may be, you feel really good about yourself. And then something happens, you're there, you celebrate for what? A few minutes, 5 minutes. And then you're back down to baseline again. And now you're at your baseline. And then something happens, that bad news or something's happened at work, and it sinks you. You feel terrible about something. And you're there a lot longer than 5 minutes, when something like that happens. And when we're there, we eventually come out of it. We get out of that fog, we come out of it, but we're still holding on to what happened, even though something has sort of pushed us away and pushed us up to our baseline again. It just doesn't feel the same. We can celebrate, we can be happy about certain accomplishments, but we're still focusing on what's happened that has been a challenge for us. And so that's where we need to really look at, if that's happening to us, being self-aware and self-knowledgeable on when that happens. And I find that to be one of my aha moments, is recognizing when I'm struggling with something and how in that valley, what I'm doing to try to get up on the peak a little bit more or on the way out of the fog. So we are wired to be negative. It takes time to to sort out really how we can get out of it. So I want to show you this. You don't have to do it right now, but I find this to be an interesting exercise to do. And it really comes down to if you have the ability to manage your energy. And if you can manage your energy, it is a plus in keeping in control of what you can control, certainly, and working on that resiliency muscle, working on that building capacity. And this can be helpful. So this is called energizers versus energy suckers. And those of you who've seen this before, hopefully it's a reminder for you, but I find this to be a helpful tip is jot down everything on your list under energizers, everything that makes you fulfilled. You know, all of the people you love to talk to, the things you like to do, the tasks you love to do, anything that gives you joy. You know, if you were to write that in a list under energizers and do the same for energy suckers. The people, the challenges, your irritations, your frustrations, both personally and professionally, put them all on paper. And I find that if kind of seeing it is also a nice way of kind of getting it out of our minds. We call that brain dumping. So it's an opportunity to kind of get it on paper. But then what you can do is essentially sandwich it. So if you have the ability to do something that gives you energy, gives you joy first thing, follow it up with something on your energy sucker list, and then follow that up with an energizer. So sandwich things that provide you comfort, joy, balance, and just if you can, take a look at your day. If you know you have some things that are going to really drain you, so you've lost your capacity, you don't feel like you have that capacity any longer, try to sandwich them between things that do provide you some form of fulfillment and purpose. And I find that this to be an interesting way of looking at it. It's not going to be perfect every day, but it's an activity to get us thinking about resiliency that way. It's again, advancing through adversity. That's what resiliency is. So if we can sort of look at ways that we can do that ourselves, we can really be models of kind of pushing through our days. And the purpose of this balancing act is so we're not mentally exhausted at the end of the day. So if we can sandwich what we do and our tasks, it is a way to build our mental resiliency muscle. And that is something that we can lean into as we are dealing with change and challenge. So a couple of other recommended reading here. There's, again, this is absolutely only a fraction of the amazing books and podcasts out there. But this is when I want to know what are some of those books and some of those podcasts that you have read or listened to. Anything that you really enjoy kind of leaning into when it comes to this topic of mental and emotional resiliency. There are a few pieces here. My favorites, of course, Peaks and Valleys. I have Brene Brown, Rising Strong here as well. So again, an old, I have the book at home as well, but an old CD case, but I really love Brene Brown. And then we are a faith-based family. And so this one from Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life is another really great read I really love. So you'll see there, Atomic Habits by James Clear is a really great read as well. Spark Joy, Dr. Greg Wells, he wrote some really interesting reads as well, but these particular one talked about rest, refocus, and recharge. So again, what can we do from an individual standpoint to build our resiliency muscle? And there are some things we can do. And Leanne mentioned it. We can get outside, we can exercise, we can eat well. I wanted to really focus in on from an emotional, mental wellness standpoint, what are some of the things that we can do? And there are some valuable pieces here I find in these readings. From an emotional resiliency, this is a whole topic, and probably one of my favorite ones to talk about actually is emotional resiliency and emotional self-care. How do we take care of ourselves? Especially when we are inundated with bad news, when we're challenged with change, maybe some changes at work, some changes in our personal lives. And it makes us sometimes question, our living purpose in some cases. So when we start to look at kind of when we get into a fog and we've, jumped off that cliff moment and we're kind of unclear, this is where one of the other challenges I'm having with today's session is challenging you to think maybe a little differently, specifically in that fog, specifically in that time when we are challenged with something, is encouraging us to not wait for things to happen to us, but actually creating things, doing something, taking an actionable step in the direction to find our purpose. And I have to tell you, I'm just taking a look at my time here to share this minute of my vulnerable and authentic self is I have had mental illness challenges in my family. And my brother, who was challenged he's up in his mid 40s now. It's been a long 30 plus years of challenges and addiction. And it was during the time when our family was really in a valley, where um, we had a young family at the time, and my husband and myself had two children. Jacob was 6 and Olivia was 4. And we were walking along the streets of London that particular year. Victoria Park had just opened for skating, so we took the kids skating, and Jacob walked around and he noticed people who were living in the cold, and he had a hard time with that. He got home and he said, why don't people have homes, And so it prompted conversations about the need to maybe do something from our responsibility. What can we do to help others? And so when he was 6, he came up with an idea where he took all of his toys out of his room and wanted to give them to kids that he saw on the streets of London. And he wanted to do it right then and there. And it turned into an annual initiative where we did not go up and down the road, but we collected thousands and thousands and thousands of toys, books, games, stuffed animals, and hygiene products for children in need. And we've done it for 11 years. That was when he was 6. So 11, or going on our 12th year. We've supported, because of this 6-year-old idea, over 8,000 kids in London. And it was, giving them something to be excited about Christmas morning was his little idea of kind of what and how he can make a difference. The reason why I'm sharing this very Coles Notes version of the whole initiative is it has become our family passion project. It doesn't matter what we're dealing with. It doesn't matter who we're, the challenge, the change, the adversity. We have figured out a way to find joy in the service to others. And I was literally just listening to a podcast on the way to where I am right now, a few hours from London, and listening to this podcast talking about, you can be Olympians, you can have all these successes and accomplishments in the world, but the question is, now what? Or what's truly making us happy is the question. And what reigns, I feel, across all discussions about this is in service to others, volunteering, finding something that you're passionate about and going after it, creating it. What is that opportunity? And so I share that as just again, a personal story on how dealing with some challenge and adversity growing up with mental illness in my family, to really finding a way to help kids in need is really what our family project is all about. So it's called the Jansen Christmas Toy Drive. Some of you will probably know what that is, but anyway, I just wanted to share that. Another element of this is sort of building that resiliency muscle is keeping track of the great things that happen to us. We dwell on things that go wrong. We need to focus on things that go right. And so this isn't as grand as an 11-year campaign of in the City of London, but this is a simple jar and it's called the Happiness Jar Challenge. And it sounds silly, but each time I find when I do this in person and chat with families and leaders and individual contributors after a session, oh, I'm going to keep this and going to do this at home with my kids. This is something we do. Is the kudos, you might have heard of a kudos challenge or gratitude challenge, is really keeping track of things that go well. And, in this age of social media and phone addiction, and that's a whole other discussion, is that we kind of lose sight on some of these pieces of how we need to take care of ourselves and focusing in on some of the positive things that happen to us because they happen every day. Let's keep track of them. And that is something that I find to be a helpful family project anyway that we'd like to do. Another favorite of mine is Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty is another one. This is another recommended read. Think Like a Monk. It says train your mind for peace and purpose every day. So this is another one, and I really love his discussions and how he writes his book. He also has a podcast, I believe, called On Purpose. Really, really, really well done. And he talks about, like if you were to think of, I'll leave you as we kind of finish off here soon, is, you know, from Jay's perspective, he's like, what's one thing you're proud of today? What's one thing you're proud of today? And if you think about it, you're probably proud of a lot of great things. Start collecting them, start putting them on paper. And I find that to be a really great practice to sort of move into this discussion on resilience. It allows us to build our capacity so we can deal with things that come our way. Now, the third element of this is we've talked a little bit about change, the human side of change, the cliff moments, the fog. We've talked about building resiliency and capacity. So how do we kind of take this and move it more into our workplaces? And we start to recognize what's important when things don't feel as comfortable. Remember, we talked about this from familiar to unfamiliar. We can get pushed into emotions that are very alike the infant that is put into a strange or different situation. And so when we start to recognize what's important, we do have to look at, what are some of the things we need to think about and remember. So I love this graphic. It's like every setback is just proof that the story isn't over yet. This is an interesting one. I relate to this a lot because in the trajectory of my leadership and from business owner for the last almost 22 years to being a faculty member, teaching business leadership to postgraduate students, to the international student world, now no longer as many students in the college system, which means less faculty. These are some of the setbacks that I've had to endure, unfortunately. So kind of then what is my next play here? And that's where looking at this, I leaned into this, is I had to figure out a way. I needed to stitch a new garment, specifically when things go wrong or don't go as planned. I had to think of what can I create? What can I do to create a new opportunity? And which is why I've been able to really lean into health promotion at work and business leadership and tying them together. So this was an individual, Sonia Renee Taylor, was a guest on Brene Brown's podcast called Unlocking Us. And this was around COVID time. So obviously we're thankfully past this, but I wanted to share this because this is, I find I really lean into this and the message is she was talking about how people were wanting to get back to normal, getting back to normal, getting back to normal. And she says, well, not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment. We're being given the opportunity to do something different. It is a way to think about embracing change. It's a resiliency piece if we can do this. In the midst of change, challenge, and adversity, as we know it, unfamiliar, uncomfortable, it's hard. We don't know which way is up sometimes. The fog is thick. If we can look at ways in which what is the opportunity here? What really is my purpose from this challenge and change to move into a different way or move into a different opportunity? So I find this to be an interesting, again, it consistently pops up in my world anyway, is I'm being given a new opportunity to stitch something new. Why not take it? And so I wanted to share that as we sort of fall into this piece on culture is as leaders, people leaders, teammates, individuals, we're really needing, I think, to lean into this last kind of element is championing a culture of progress over perfection. There's so much disarray in our world right now, in our workplaces, in our families, in some cases, on our teams. We need to look at progress over perfection. Perfection kills progress. I hope that's another aha moment for someone. But some things we can do is we can celebrate effort in the small wins, celebrate mistakes. I was working with this organization and they were proud. They had a mistake Monday. They literally talked about mistakes they made the week prior. And they talked about them as a team, talk about building trust. Recognize growth on our teams and our peers. Look at ways we can empower each other. Lean into fear, which is not easy. Lean into that uncertainty. What's the next opportunity? And lastly is learning ways we can nurture a culture of caring. Caring and kindness go so far. Being in service to others, practicing our servant leadership skills. Those are so powerful on teams. And I find that to be very, very true. I wrote an article and the Cowan team will be sharing this with you. It's called Nurturing a Culture of Caring. And it was in our Business London magazine. And it's just a couple of page article on how do we do that from a health promotion, a wellness, a mental wellness perspective. And we encourage you to take a look at that. I'm also going to be sharing some resources with you, specifically around culture, wellness culture workshops, employee well-being sessions, and some really great information I hope that you will find helpful for you, your teams, and your employees. So I wanted to sign off and turn it back over to Leanne. Hopefully I have enough time, about 10 to, pretty good, to showcase and to share, maybe hear from the audience a little bit. We have some time for that. So Leanne,
Hi.
or she, hey, do you want me to stop share then? Is that, and I've got my email here if people also wanted to, and they'll be on the microsite as well.
Sure. No, thank you. I can see you and on the screen here. Thank you so much. What a great presentation. You talked about aha moments. I think for me, I loved the idea of the energy list, sandwiching your energy with your energy suckers. Great idea. As you were talking, I was making my list of all
Oh,
my
good.
energize me and the things like dishes and house chores and long lists at work that are suckers. So how do you take when I look at my lists at work, the ones that I know are going to just drain my energy, how do you sandwich those? I think that was just a great idea. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
Lots of great resources on the books that you gave. I loved that, and your the positivity journaling. I've done that before, but having the jar, I think that's a great idea, especially when you have young kids. I'm just looking at the chat. I don't see, I see comments and people talked about Atomic Habits was a book. Uh, People saying thank you for the reminder on the gratitude jar. The Jansen toy drive. Kudos to you and your family for this. Thank you for that comment. Some people had mentioned about the one of the books that you talked about, Who Moved My Cheese, one of the authors you mentioned was the writer of Who Moved My Cheese. But I'm not seeing any other. I see Love the Slide with Sonia, would like to have a copy of the
Mm-hmm.
slide, which you will get the presentation there as well. The recording will go out with the slides. I don't see any other questions, and I don't think Shannon people can come off mute. So if you do have a question specific around how to promote that positivity, I guess another thing you mentioned about culture of progress over perfection.
Mm-hmm.
I think me personally, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and so I tend to be, you said we're wired negatively. You think about all the things you did wrong instead of thinking of the things that are going
Absolutely.
well, right? And celebrating those small wins or learning from your mistakes. I think we could really do well as a culture to think that way.
Yeah, that is a big one. Perfection kills progress. So, especially where, some of our teams, some of our processes and systems might be in flux, because of the world as it is. And so recognizing that, and how do we celebrate progress though? How do we celebrate our new normal, as Sonia talked about? It's not going back to where we were, but how do we move forward with the new information, the new system, the news that might have, might come down the pipe. So leaning into that is a tremendous opportunity, I think, and we don't talk enough about that. Lean into progress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
loved it. Somebody did mention any tips on how to help support coworkers who are always stuck on the negative worry, triggers of a teammate and getting upset with each other. It's
That's
funny
it.
because I was going to ask when you talked about that curve and coming back
Mhm.
up. Sometimes you don't know when the light at the end of the tunnel is coming and you're stuck in this. So how do you help those people?
Yeah, it's kind of like, how do you get unstuck when you're stuck?
Mm,
And you know, recognizing through empathy and understanding that people are going to be in that fog sometimes longer than others. And so I think we have to just give people that space, to recognize that, they might be in that particular that particular fog for a longer time than others, specifically, and how powerful that cliff moment might have been. It is very difficult when I have someone in my family who is this, glass is always half empty. Doesn't matter if the best news of the world came down the pipe, it's still the glass is half empty. It's not half full. And it's very challenging to be in relation with someone like that. And then know, if we were to look at the colleague and coworker that what was that cliff moment that they might have been dealing with, or is they just the way they are? In some cases, some people are like that. So
mm,
I think as our I think we have to protect ourselves as well. So try not to get, because we can't change people. We can't, expect someone to be different. It's just supporting them, asking questions, using that compass, empathy, support, ask questions. And I find that moral compass to be a great tool for that, is supporting people in the ways that we can, but protecting ourselves as well.
I know you mentioned the positivity journal. One of the employers I worked for in my past, we rolled out a positivity journal just for work. So
That's
everybody
awesome.
had a journal and we would write every day. You were encouraged to write three things that happened at work that were positive. And at the end of that month, people were welcome to drop their positivity journal in for a chance for a draw for something. But the people did drop it in, and the comments around how it really made them think differently when they were having meetings with their coworkers or interacting with coworkers that were maybe more irritable, and it just improved the overall mood in the workplace. So
Interestingly, you say that, Leanne, because there was another group, a large hospital in London. You might have seen them online. They did a gratitude, those old school chains that the kids make at Christmas time, like the garland, like the chain. and they took construction paper and they wrote, all the employees participated, talk about culture of what they're grateful for, and they linked all of them, and they had all this garland up around the entire workplace. Like, talk about something we can do to embrace change and foster positivity in our workplaces. What an easy thing to do. So there's another opportunity as a little takeaway nugget for workplaces to practice gratitude. We don't do it enough. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions in there. People just saying thank you. Love that we really do need to look at ourselves and how we can change our mindset and thought process. Feel once we do that, this will catch on with other people. Positivity is contagious. So great comment. Lots of people saying aha moments. So thank you. I will
Awesome.
give everybody the last 5 minutes back, and we look forward to sending you a copy of the presentation in the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much, Meaghan, for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Leanne. Thanks again.
Bye.